All right, so I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. It's the February 13th, 2013 meeting of the Shelburne Board of School Directors. First item is 2.0 adjustments to the agenda. We're actually going to have two of those. We're going to add item 4.2 in presentations. Dave and Kathy are going to talk to us about the work they're doing on board professional development and have a proposal there. And then we're going to add an executive session as 10.0 for the purpose of discussing personnel. We're going to have 11.0 be adjournment. Audience and communication, we have a very small audience this evening, and I assume that's to do 4.1, the social studies presentation. So with that, we'll move quickly into 4.1, the social studies presentation. So I have to say, I'm excited you guys are here. I'm so sick of math and science and reading. That's what we get all the time. And I always liked social studies when I was in school, so this is great.
Way back here either.
Wherever you're comfortable. If you guys want to sit at the table or however you stand, as long as you're not blocking the camera.
We've got an overview that we put together that goes K-5.
Okay.
And then an addendum that is an example of the K-5 KUD. That's right.
It's a third grade KUD.
Third grade. Okay.
We thought, we didn't want to overwhelm you with paperwork, but we thought you might like to see an example.
Yeah.
So I'm Jessica Toulis, here to represent K-5.
Okay.
I have been on this committee for a few years now, and the exciting news is we, when we go through our common drive, and I can go in myself and go through our common drive at school, and I can pull up all of the KUDs, which are the knows, understands, and do's that we have for social studies. I can go into K, and I can pull up that folder, and I can see all of the things that the kindergarten teachers are all teaching. I can do that across grade level through grade 5. So that's huge progress for us, that we've had time to sit and work with people like Heather Barron and Bill Rich and plan these units and integrate, pre-assessments, formative, summative assessments. And so I was able to, pull together all of this because, of course, I teach third grade, just looking at our common drive and talking to a few teachers, that's huge for us. They're all cooperatively written and being taught by the teachers. And as I said, they have all 3 assessments. And I just printed off part of the third grade one, and we'll get to that so that you can sort of see what that looks like. So in kindergarten, of course, all of these are written based off the grade level expectations for social studies. They're written in bands, so there's kindergarten, then there's a 1-2 band. By the time they leave second grade, they need to have been exposed to and had all of the GEs in the 1-2 band. Then there's a 3-4 band and a 5-6 band. So what we do is, of course, kindergarten has their own. So they write their unit and then put all the GEs within the unit. So our community is one of their units. What does a community need, and what does it mean to be a part of a community? Then I think they actually start with this one, the story of me and how people are alike and different. And then they get into family traditions and heritage. So how is your family's heritage expressed in a special way? That seems like those are just the essential questions with months of weeks, depending on the unit, maybe a month or 2 of work put into it. Then we get into first and second grade. We also have to remember that, we teach, so in third grade, we teach 2 big science units and 2 big social studies units. It's pretty typical across the K3. Just trying to do all of those well, that's about the amount of time that we have. So in first and second grade, they do all about us. Are all communities the same, and why do humans form communities? They do citizenship, and how do citizens shape a community, and what does it mean to be a good citizen? And then in third grade, we have built a year-long unit called Shelburne's Story, and within that unit, we teach all of our science and social studies. We focus on big ideas, but then we always bring it back to the local so it makes sense for kids. So we do geology, ecology, and then we do history, like local history, and bringing that up to Vermont history, because the 3-4 is all about local and community and Vermont history. And then we get into economy. And then in 4th and 5th grade, they continue from where we leave off. They get into the Vermont history, how has Vermont changed over time and what drove those changes, with a focus on migration, land use, economy, inhabitants, and government. Then they get into U.S. history and geography, and then they get into world geography. And then, so I'm going to talk about the KUD briefly, and then questions, and then Eric will talk about 6-8. All of this is meant to build and get them ready for middle school. So there's a copy of the 3rd grade, and I didn't put all of it in there, but just enough so that you could sort of see how we think through this process and build our units. 3rd grade has science and social studies all under one KUD, and we spent days is the right word, writing this and putting it all together. So the 2nd page, if you flip it, shows all of the social studies that we get into in 3rd grade. History, economy, geography, local geography. Where in the world is Shelburne? They don't even know that at this point. So, and just reading maps and figuring that basic map skills out. Right now we're working actually on the history portion of it. So we just start with, there was actually, interestingly enough, there was a Native American permanent settlement found in Shelburne. And that's really exciting for them. So we get into what that looked like, and now we're moving into the first 10 families that settled in Shelburne. And we're getting into all of that history. We build timelines by the end. We're reenacting, actually, what life was like then. Just trying to really get it in there. And then...
Where do the materials come from? I'm sure there's not an off-the-shelf textbook.
No, there isn't. We have some great resources, and we have, you know, Colleen Haig has really helped us. We've created a photo story that goes through a lot of the history. Ellen Matthews at school helped us do that. There are some great Shelburne books, and we've sort of retyped to make some of it 3rd grade appropriate so they can understand it. It's been a lot of work, but it's working. We have some, you know, Discovery Ed videos so that they can see some of the Native Americans of this area and what that was like. We've had to we use Shelburne Museum, we use Shelburne Farms, we use all the local resources that we can. Yeah, so.
We're lucky in a town like
We are.
Shelburne.
Yes, I was going to say, can we join in?
Well, Russ came in actually and did a presentation for our 3rd graders. We need to have him again. And we always have Paul, every spring Paul Boney comes and does a presentation. And he actually, it's amazing the knowledge he has about the history of Shelburne. And they want his signature, they love him. Autograph, everything, it's really fun. He has actually created these big, huge town maps for us, and he brings them, and we get to keep them, but we put them up when he comes, and he talks about all the changes in the town. So, yeah, it's quite nice. We are lucky, we're really lucky. So that's, I mean, we just wanted you to see what a KUD actually looks like when we're using that term all over the place. So, you know, it's interesting, we do this pre-assessment, and we have these items in this bag, and they have to figure out how it relates to their world and how it relates to Shelburne, and they actually don't know a whole lot. Even the Vermont teddy bear, they don't understand, is a local business that fuels our economy until we go through that very clearly with them. It's pretty amazing. So I mean, I feel like K-5 is working together and on the right track, and you know, everybody, we've had wonderful resources, I said, with Heather and Bill really helping us become cohesive and sit down and think through this process and use the GEs and write our plans. And you know, I've cross-referenced with our national standards, and we're doing really well as far as making sure we're hitting all of those.
You know, what strikes me about this, you know, joke before, I'm sick of hearing about the, you know, the other subjects, is that, you know, a lot of what's going on there now is driven by the various standardized tests that, that we're required to take, and you don't have that here.
Right.
So, you know, in a way, that's probably good. You know, maybe have a little bit more flexibility with the curriculum. But at the same time, then of course it begs the question, you know, what are you doing for assessments?
Exactly.
Whereas there, it's pretty clear, you know, at least a significant part of the assessments. Obviously, it's not everything,
Right.
but you know, you don't have that for.
No, you
subjects.
don't, but, you know, we're very thoughtful with that. Depending, you know, a lot of 4th and 5th grade actually create assessments for their units. In 3rd grade, we do, you know, exit tasks. 1st and 2nd grade is constant formative assessment, taking the temperature all the time. So, you know, we actually did this whole Native American thing, and then they have to use private reasoning time, and, okay, so what were Native Americans' wants and needs? And you can immediately tell, you know, that day, who's getting it and who isn't, and where you need to backtrack and with who, and then move forward from there. And we do, at the end of each section of our unit, we actually have them do a written reflection on their learning, and then they create this huge scrapbook, Shelburne Story scrapbook, that's a reflection of all of their learning from the year. I'm sure you saw Petra's
Yes.
last year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, as far as, it's tricky. It's tricky K-5 assessing, just as, you know, when there isn't something that's prescribed for you.
Yep.
So it is a lot of project-based.
We also did talk about it. I'm going to actually move
Yeah,
around. I feel like
sure.
I'm behind.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
We talked about it as we were putting this together, the presentation together, and especially as you move to the 6/8, a lot of what the Common Core does is processing information and reading content material and being able to take that content material and make sense of it. And one of the things that I noted is that that's what some of the kneecap writing asks them to do. So it's not per se a social studies
Yeah.
assessment, but you're seeing that ability for students to think about what they've read and then quote and articulate about what they've read in kneecaps. So I think our scores there are indicative of what we're doing with social studies.
And sometimes they are social studies topics.
Exactly, exactly.
And we've talked with Molly about forming a CSSU common assessment, and we just haven't gotten it finished yet, but that's definitely on our agenda. And we've spent hours kind of debating how to make that happen, and especially CSSU-wide.
Yeah.
So, it's
Yeah,
there.
because they're all going to get to CVU.
Right. Well, and when we plan everything with Molly, we have teachers from CVU sitting in.
Yeah.
I mean, I have CVU's a curriculum, and we know where they're going and what's going to be expected when they get there. And that's when we plan as a district. So it's all the schools have representation, including CVU.
Yep.
So that's been amazingly helpful.
How much time during the day or the week do you think is spent with social studies?
K-5?
Yeah.
It depends on the team. I would say that especially at K2, with so much push on just getting kids to read and be solid readers, and, you know, we're spending an hour and 15 minutes easily a day on math, that I'm hopeful that they're getting a few hours a week. And the other piece is, there's a lot of integration. So how can you integrate this into your reader's workshop? And how can you integrate this into your writer's workshop so that you're getting more than what it looks like on paper? You know, in 3rd grade and in 4th and 5th grade, that time starts to bump up even more. So, but Jensa and I spend every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon block on social studies, integrating reading and writing into that. And, well, it depends if we're on a science or a social studies unit. They swap. So.
It's a little more cut and dried at the 6/8 level in that we've got on 3 of the teams the equivalent of 5 45 to 50-minute sessions. Sometimes those are double sessions, but 5 per week. Alpha does it a little bit differently, but they do, I would say, at least 2 of their integrative units per year draw on this social studies material, sometimes bringing in other curricular areas. But so it's comparable to the time we're putting in for the math and the science on the teams.
Great.
It's definitely tricky fitting it all in. And doing it well. That's the trick. I want it to make sense to kids, and I don't want to rush through things. So, you know, it's always that battle of quality versus quantity, and making sure that you I just have a hard time with, oh, let's just throw in a 2-week unit. Well, that doesn't make sense to them. If they can't make sense of it, then their learning goes down.
It
So-
seems clear to integrate it with the literacy, though. Very, very clear. And I just had a conversation with Petra today about historical fiction and what is historical fiction and how enjoyable that is to be able to have that.
Right. Well, and we always try to integrate as much as we can too with read aloud. We read chapter books, and for example, I read Drita, My Homegirl, which I can integrate all kinds of information about Kosovo and refugees, and that's in a whole separate time of the day, and it's a whole separate conversation that we're having, but it's also amazing learning that's taking place. So, I mean, there's lots of different pockets that we're trying to do that with. And same with math, we're trying to push science into math as much as we can. Gotta squeeze it all in. Yeah?
Talk about 6/8.
Yep.
So 6/8, this has been drawn from a document that we have been working on with all 4 teams for more than a year now, looking at differentiated instruction, and then also with the social studies documents. All of that's come in. So we worked with, is it Heather Barnes?
Barron.
Barron that worked with us on this. So after all of that, and looking at what we've done and deciding on what we could all agree on, we agreed on these 5 main areas with the essential questions that followed. So the conflict and change, which is basically about wars and how they change us, civic and social responsibilities, how do we govern ourselves, then the geography with physical and human geography, place name geography, that type of thing. All the teams cover culture and what is a culture and how do cultures interact. That sometimes comes back to conflict and change, cultures interacting there, but that's a part of it all. And then economics and the production and distribution and consumption of goods are the 5 main components that all the teams touch on. That's followed by the Holden House Social Studies curriculum, which basically puts it into a manageable context for us. So the 5 things that I just read drive the things that you see here. Bob, you might recognize the format as your curriculum night with Robbie. It's borrowed from Jeff Hines, and it's been changed through the years, but the basic format has stayed the same. We share a social studies teacher. Kathy Sheeran from the Winton House team teaches our 7th graders. This is the 2nd year that that's happened. We give them a math teacher and they give us a social studies teacher. And so that's been really, really helpful because Kathy Sheeran and I have been able to talk about what we're doing common to both teams. And then because we're both driving the social studies committee, we're bringing the other 2 teams on board as well. And so there's that cross-team planning of this. And so the 6th graders spend a lot of time with the whole idea of what a culture is and how cultures interact, and then how cultures basically feed and trade themselves in that whole economic strand of it. 7th grade, you start to see the U.S. history starting with the colonial era and then moving into, if all goes well, pre-Civil War and the causes of the Civil War. And then in 8th grade, we take up with the Civil War and we move it all the way through to what should be like the Cold War, end of the Cold War. That's an aggressive timeline. And Kathy and I talked before I came over here today, and I said, so how are we doing with the 7th graders? And she's like, I think we're gonna make it to the Industrial Revolution. And I was joking with the 8th graders that we've been bogged down outside of Petersburg with the Civil War for like 3 weeks now and trying to break out. And I think today we finally got to the Lee surrendering to Grant. So the Civil War is now over in Holden House, and we're moving on to 21st century conflict. But basically, this document is something that just we use as an organizing tool to see what we're going to do with the kids. Having said that, I want you to come back to this overarching idea, and this was something that we talked about a lot. So all 4 teams are going to approach social studies a bit differently. But what do we really want students to get out of social studies on any of the 4 teams? And I referenced the first sentence that says, over the course of 3 years, we seek to provide multiple opportunities for students to think critically and make sense of complex social issues and historical issues. And I read that just because looking at this document and then the curriculum document and then finally focusing down to a unit that we've done. And this is a unit that All 4 teams are doing some component of this idea of revolution, this idea of why revolution happens, this idea of historical revolutions, and then what's happening in the Middle East right now. So this is a big thing, and trying to make sense of it. And adults have trouble making sense of what's happening in the Middle East right now. For an adolescent, it's very difficult. And so we decided that we would all do some idea of revolution. At least 3 of the teams, and I think Alpha as well, is taking on this added component of the French Revolution. Shared text there, driven by the Common Core, historical text, helping students to understand what that says and what it means. So basically it's the interplay between looking at the American Revolution, looking at the 7th grade year, because I did this with 8th grade, and what they learned about the American Revolution, and how the American government moved from revolution and anarchy to a government that would govern themselves, and how the Articles of Confederation didn't quite work, but they were able to then put together a constitution. And so they were able to, in a successful way, move from revolution to governing themselves. The French didn't do it quite so well, and we talked a lot about the guillotine and how many people died and the starvation and how they just couldn't figure out how to govern themselves, and as a result, thousands of people died, and it took them a long time to get it together. And we talked back and forth about what happened and why that happened, and what was happening in each country at that time. And then while we were doing that, we were also looking at the Arab Spring and what was coming about in the Middle East, and how those countries are at the point of revolution and trying to move out of that revolution and into governing themselves. And in the process of doing that, similar to the French Revolution, and similar to, in some cases, to the American Revolution, you've got people that have been at war with each other now trying to figure out how to get along and govern themselves. And so really throughout the year, going back and forth among these 3 things, saying, so what happened? And then coming back to the Civil War, we've talked a lot about how America moved out of the Revolution, was able to govern themselves, but they had that one issue of slavery that they didn't resolve. And so we didn't have a really bloody post-revolution like the French Revolution, but we eventually did have to come to terms with those differences. And so that's the level of conversation and the conversation we're having. It's 8th graders, so they're not always getting it, but they can certainly see that idea of anarchy. And so what's going to happen over there? And historically, how did we do it? So what can we hope for those countries? And so this is an example of that first sentence, of really getting students to think about how history drives what's happening now, and how we can learn from history and try to make sense of what's happening now. Yeah, so that's it.
Are all of the history and social studies units taught like Holden, in that they're kind of broken up by grade? Is there any of the multi-grade going on, or is
there is multi-grade? Alpha's doing multi-grade at this point, and we actually, as a team on Holden House, have talked about what it will look like going forward, with 2 or 3 of us sharing that social studies strand, because I teach all of the language arts on Holden House and then drive the social studies wing of that. And we've talked about there's certain things that we could do multi-age to build team cohesiveness. One example has been bringing the whole team together on a westward expansion unit and play this survival game that we've traditionally played with only the 8th graders. And so Alpha at this point is doing multi-age. I believe, no, I'm sorry, Symphony splits it up by teachers, but they still are doing it by grade.
I guess, looking at this, there's some things that, arguably can be taught at any grade, but if you're doing a, chronological, starting with early American history and moving up to the present day, kind of hard, I would think, if you start people, at different points, or,
Right.
just having the different grades in there, not all on the same cycle. I mean, if you're teaching it and, you're on a cycle that the 8th graders start with early America, and then they move into CVU. It's like, oops,
Right.
how do they come back to?
Right.
Or they're learning it out of order, I guess. But.
So you do yours in order, this order.
This order, there's a lot is done with timelines, no matter which team is involved with it, and that was driven by CVU as well. And meetings that we had with the social studies teachers, and one of the things that they asked for was students coming to CVU with a sense of certainly at least American history. So you know, what has happened, how many years has it taken, broadly, where did things take place? And so we do try to instill that, and I think all of the teams try to do that as well. I would say, you know, it's designed because an understanding of culture and understanding of geography really facilitates this understanding of history. But I have, again, talking about rethinking how things will go in the coming years, I actually had dinner with a couple of fifth graders the other day or the other evening with multiple families together, and both fifth graders were telling me how excited they were to get into history when they got to sixth grade, and I was like, sorry kid, that's not going to come till seventh grade. So I really kind of rethought it. If you've got sixth graders that are really excited about that history thing, then we should jump on that and we should foster that. And so trying to think about how we can do that.
And they do history in 3, 4,
Exactly,
5. It's
exactly.
interesting. So it kind of drives that excitement.
Any other questions? Or?
So you go up to the Cold War, it looks like, in 8th grade. And then in CVU, where does history start? And how far does it go?
If you look at the CVU curriculum, the 9th grade curriculum is largely a research-based, as it was described to me as the parent of an incoming 9th grader next year, as it was described to me last week. They do units, and the units are designed mostly to foster that idea of research and critical thinking. And I'm not exactly sure what the title of each of those units are. And I think
have a document, but it's at school.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So that's the 9th grade year, and then from 10th grade forward, there's electives, and there's everything from a Vermont history course taught by my former colleague Jeff Hines to
Holocaust.
the Holocaust class, and so it's more of an elective type situation from 10th, 11th, or in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade.
Does anybody get into the Vietnam War and more current wars?
That's a great question.
What?
Conflict.
Conflict, yes.
Well, so I can answer that for the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and that is that all the teams do touch on that whole idea of conflict. And I believe, as I look at what our year is going to look like, and with students' questions about how it's going to look going forward, what else are we going to learn, we'll do a conflict unit of 21st century conflicts and split kids up to address each of the conflicts, and then come to terms with, so how did one lead into the other? How were they resolved? What was the aftermath of that? And so not go through them in a linear fashion once we get to the 21st century. So.
Actually, in CVU, and at least on Fairbanks freshman year, it's a combined English social studies class, and I'm not quite sure how that works, but I assume that's probably
I think that's how they all
common
do
to the
it.
other, to the other houses.
Yeah, when I reviewed the document, it's like freshmen, and then they're all doing the same thing.
Okay.
And then it's the elective list for sophomore, junior, and
Yeah.
seniors.
Great.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Very exciting.
Nice to have
Thank
social
you.
studies
Yes.
here.
This is great.
Thanks for having us.
Is that your own particular plug?
Yeah,
Get
you're
the
welcome.
Social studies. What do you present at in the 3rd grade?
He presented about the school board.
Yeah.
And
You did?
what was so interesting was we didn't really prep the kids. We just said we were having a guest, and then we said what he did. They had the best questions because it related to them, and they have something they had great questions for us. It was really great. So
Great.
we'll call you in the spring.
All right, so just being a parent of a 3rd grader, Shelburne is unique in so many ways around this whole social study thing, but be able to take a walking field trip where you can go to town hall, you can walk to the post office. I mean, it's just like this small core town where they get to see it all work together. So
We took him to the Harrington house, and the woman was home, and she came out and gave us all kinds of history of that house and how it used to be a farm, and the cows used to cross the road. And, yeah, it was great.
You see that plaque down by the beach, the Moses Pearson?
Yes,
the-
which
that's a
he put
great
a fire out
Yep.
with beer.
with beer.
Yes, he did. Yeah, that's a great. The kids love that story. Yeah. So, thank you.
All right,
Thank you very much. Great.
Okay, next we've got 4.2, Dave and Kathy.
Well, it's probably a very good segue, because this is, what we just heard tonight is very much in the way of professional development for ourselves. So we can pass that along to, I've got enough for Alan and Megan too. The topic came up, do we have one for, at our board retreat last year about professional development. And Dave and I said we'd be interested in, in kind of looking into this and beginning to put some form around it. So we met with Elaine, had a terrific meeting with her. And Dave typed up what you see in front of us, and what we're presenting are some ideas for the board to look at and perhaps make a decision on one or more of them, and then come back and work on it as a discussion matter. First of all, what are the opportunities for professional development for the board? We've thought conferences, workshops, single topic areas such as marketing, that would be, i.e. marketing to the public, more or less, our constituency. The budget process, more to follow there probably. Consultants on specific topics. Charlie Brand, I don't remember who that person was. Laura Suarez, I guess, who has worked with the Charlotte School Board, and Harry Frank, who's with the Vermont School Board Association. And then in Elaine's office, she has a school board development library, and there are a series of DVDs, and I think you, Bob, have taken out some, Dave has taken out some, and additional reference materials there. So that's kind of on an individual basis for those of us who want to pursue that. Then we could consider some issues we're trying to develop, such as how to bring in new members to the board, develop board skills for the current members, and we're not sure what those are, but I think if we were all to put our heads together, we might come up with some ideas. Ensure a strong, cohesive, functioning board. Elaine reminded us to tell everybody not to worry, that our board is not in distress. We are a very well-functioning board. And then one issue that is certainly brought up and is right before us now is the long-term tenured members that provide stability and anchor the board, such as Russ and Bob. It's desirable to have stability and maintain continuity in anticipation of when Russ leaves the board. It would be advantageous to tap into his experience and knowledge before he leaves us. And then another possibility can also be to have a discussion with Grant Bush and/or Jed Graff, both former very long-term board members and very, very knowledgeable. Perhaps set up an hour-long meeting with either one of them and discuss some core issues of their tenure while on the board. And then perhaps pose some of our own questions. How would you handle this if it came to you, so forth and so on. So this is what we are putting forth to the board and more or less asking how we think we want to proceed with this. And are there...
How do you want to proceed with it?
I guess in the meeting with Elaine, what I really thought would be useful would be the last thing that we came up with, which would be sort of a roundtable with a long tenured board member to learn more about some of the challenges that we've had outside of the tenure of you folks. And maybe, I don't know, maybe you've overlapped with Grant or Jack.
I overlapped with both of them.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, they've both been off the board 2 to 3 years, I think.
Oh, okay.
So, my first 3 or 4 anyway, they were both on the board, maybe 5.
Yeah, but it just sounds like a great way to share experiences and learn.
I've always wanted to do this. I think it's a brilliant idea. My only concern is where do we have to be aware of the public meeting laws?
So
And to
Elaine
what
talked
extent can we do that?
specifically about that. She said you just warn it like any other meeting, but chances are no one will come anyway. Doesn't matter.
Same crowd.
She said yeah, it's no problem. Just warn it
Just
and
make
it's
sure
fine.
it's warned.
Yeah.
Right.
Interesting. Okay.
We're gonna warn it on a postage stamp and No.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at board tenure, and for those of you who weren't at the CSSU meeting, or at least the whole thing, Elaine recognized, I guess the VSBA officially recognizes people who have been on a board for 9, 12, 15, and 20 years, and then she, said, she acknowledged some other people who have been on, like 17 years and 21 years and that kind of thing. And, I've been on, 7 now, and as you all know, I've said I'm done after this term. That'll be 9. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I think 12, 15, 20 years is too long. I just, for me personally, but I question whether that's such a great thing. But that's other people's decision. But certainly when you look at a board, it's good to have a mix of people with some degree of tenure, and some people with relatively new, and it helps renew a board and can bring in fresh ideas and all of that. So one thing is I look at this, somebody is going to replace me in 2 years, and I don't know how many of you guys will be on the board 2 years from now, hopefully all of you, but how do you get somebody in and get them up to speed quickly? And Dave, you probably still feel like you're getting up to speed on certain things, and I think that's one thing too that would be very helpful, not just for Shelburne, but for the other districts in Chittenden South. What does that curriculum look like? How has it been for you as relatively new board members? What are the things you struggle with understanding? I mean, there's so much lingo, and acronyms. So what are the things that you guys struggle with that would help you get up to speed faster, or would help new people coming onto the board get up to speed with? I think that would be tremendously helpful. And yeah, I think most of the boards in this supervisory union are relatively high functioning boards. I know Elaine is appreciative of that. We've not had anything on this board in quite some time. I don't think that has been stressful, and we're fortunate that the community either seems to be ignoring us, or at least is comfortable enough with what's going on, other than the occasional,
most of the time,
right? I
right.
was gonna say, other than the occasional issue that brings out a big crowd, but that we don't have people falling all over themselves to run against sitting board members because they think we're doing something badly, I guess.
We haven't heard about
Well,
it.
like I say, it's either because they're ignoring us, or
Right.
actually, no, we'd know by now if somebody was running against, or if somebody had taken out the petitions to run against Tim and Bob. I don't think that's happened. So unless they do a write-in candidacy,
Right.
I think you guys are going to get reelected. So, but yeah, I
As long as we got our years right. I mean,
That's right.
want to make sure
Who's
we're
going for how many?
we might be running for the same seat.
you'd hope they could fix that if that
I
indeed
think Colleen
happened.
would have let us
Yeah,
know.
we'll
I
take
hope.
care of that.
Good.
But yeah,
Okay.
I think that it's a great outline, and I guess as far as it being a proposal, I'd say just keep running with it.
Okay.
Keep doing what you're doing. I don't know if this is the kind of thing then that we would need to adopt as much as just
I guess the one thing these are all great ideas, but in the interest of efficiency, I would almost feel like a 1 hour meeting with Grant Bush or Jed Graff would be a great way to start. We don't have to, it's simple, we can meet somewhere, it's an hour, it's done.
Yeah.
And then we lay the groundwork. If you guys want to pick a date or if we want to decide to pursue that and look at contacting either one of these folks to see if they'd be interested in doing that.
I'm sure they would if they're around.
Right, they're in Florida. One of them's in Florida, right?
Grant, I believe, spends
March.
a good bit of time in Florida now. Jed, I'm pretty sure is around. He travels, or at least he used to travel a fair amount for work.
Yeah.
But I don't think he's, doing a Florida winter or anything like that.
Grant is here, I believe, until March, which only gives us a couple of more weeks. And then he's gone until April or May.
Okay.
Yeah. But he is here in the fall and into the winter a good portion of the time. So it's timing-wise also. When do we want to do our first meeting? Do we want to try to fit it in before the end of the school year? In which case we could get in touch with Jed probably. I think we felt they were almost interchangeable, we heard. I mean, they wouldn't want to hear that, clearly, but.
They certainly bring, I think, different perspectives and different strengths. Grant could still tell you, I'm sure, exactly how all of the school funding formulas and the taxes are calculated and all of that. One difference between Grant and me is he used to do a spreadsheet at town meeting every year about how all of those things worked, and not something that I was going to try to repeat. But Jed, I think, was less focused on the mechanics of all of those things, but he was always very helpful in the negotiations meetings, and he was chair of the Shelburne board and of the CSSU board at various points. I don't think Grant ever was as chair of CSSU. He was definitely, he was my predecessor as chair of this board. I guess I just, go for it. Get in touch with them and get a handful of dates from them. And, actually, I don't know if you guys have, Colleen, when she's trying to schedule various CSSU committees, does this thing where you just go online somehow and all, it lays out a handful of possible dates, and it's easy to go on and just put, which ones work for you and which ones don't. I have no idea how to do that, but.
So maybe Colleen could help us do that, unless you can do it.
I don't know. Yeah, we'll ask her if it's easy, and we'll do that.
Yeah, and she may be doing that through UVM.
Yeah.
I think it's a Google Docs type scheduling thing, isn't it?
Meeting was.
Yeah, so there's got to be some way to do it. So.
Meeting was good.
So yeah, I think something like that would be great. But a little bit longer term, as I say, I think something that areas that any of you are interested in. How do we learn more about to be more effective? But then also, when we get new board members, how do we help them hit the ground running, or get up to speed faster?
Besides the presentation that Elaine gives to new board members and that VSBA offers also. So something that we could do internally for the board.
Well, for instance, you mentioned there DVD libraries of 10 school board topics. Well, unless there is some natural progression to go through those, what would you see as the, what do we spend the most of our time doing, or what is perhaps most confusing to somebody new? So figuring out, if you only have 10 hours a month or whatever to devote to this to get yourself up to speed, how would you prioritize that? How would you organize a curriculum for that, if you will? You could probably go to conferences and workshops, year round. Can we identify some of the best? And then of course, is there, are there budgetary impacts of any of these things? I think there is a line item in the budget for school board stuff. I have no idea what it is. Yeah, covers our lofty salaries.
Right. Right. Well, it did cover my attendance at the VSBA annual meeting.
Yeah.
and travel expenses for that. And I think, you know, more than one of us could go to that kind of thing. So all depending upon time for a lot of people also.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, we've got a couple steps we can take and
Yeah.
move from there.
yeah, great. Thank you very much.
So, next is 5.0, the principal's report.
All right.
5.1.
Walk you through, you've got my report in front of you there. Kind of hit highlights, and just in case you didn't know, Patty's on her way to Oregon. That's where Patty is tonight. She and John Madden are heading out to a math best practice leadership conference out there that goes the next 3 days. So I'll do my best to do it solo tonight. So we've had the GOB competition, you know, that continues, had some students do that. You may or may not have heard that we had another guest teacher from this year from Thailand. Last year we had Tao from China. This year it was Tao from China. This year Nina from Thailand. And she was with us for 2 months and visited just about every classroom in the school, did an after-school SCAT class. Just a really great opportunity. Started in Heinsberg, spent 2 months with us, and now is in Williston. And hopefully I think we're kind of into that pipeline where we'll just be seeing that. It's just a tremendous free resource, and a big thanks to the Maitland family who hosted her, because that's really our cost is room and board and having them close to school. Have we talked about Green Ribbon School? Is that new news, or
I've heard it.
Yeah, I'm curious because some of this goes back. This is kind of a synthesis. I've talked about them at PTO, and so so I'm a little blurred. I don't want to be redundant, but this is one definitely we want to talk about in that the U.S. Department of Education, you used to maybe have heard of the Blue Ribbon School, which was for academic excellence. Last year they piloted a Green Ribbon School, which is for promoting faculty wellness, for student health, environmental education, sustainability in your building. And Vermont didn't participate last year. This is the first year they chose to participate, and so they will select up to 3 schools from each state, so about 150 schools nationwide. Jocelyn and I put together an application for it, and we're one of the top 3. And so that's been forwarded from Vermont on down to the U.S. Department of Education. They're just verifying that we meet all their criteria, and there's going to be some significant recognition. You know, it's of work that our PTO has been doing, you know, in the feed program and the table to farm. I think what we're going to be able to do is leverage it for grants, is really what it will come down to, is, you know, even as we, you know, when we later talk about facility, how can we turn this as we're, you know, if we're improving the school, well, we're a Green Ribbon School, but what else could we do to really improve our sustainability and be a model, because we've already been recognized as a model for what we're doing. So that's when really our thinking is, how do we turn this into, it doesn't come with money, I think it comes with a big banner, which is, we'll have a big banner in the school, which will be great. Yep. But pretty exciting, and it'll be headline news as soon as, it really isn't public until DOE announces it. Then it becomes a very big public deal. Some great
collab. The only one in Vermont?
No, there is.
Oh, I thought it was 3 nationally.
No, 150 nationally, 3 in Vermont.
I got it. Okay,
So St. Albans Elementary, and then a small little school. I think it's Reading Community or some small school. Yeah, I don't know.
Somebody at PTO pointed out that the Sustainability Academy in Burlington didn't get nominated.
Thanks for mentioning that. I was going to keep that one under my chin.
Remember all the
But
flack I got last night for not seat racing us against everyone else, so I'm just trying to make sure that
get it going. So I just highlight some cool things we've got going with CVU, as well as our 8th graders begin that transition. I think we continue to kind of develop a stronger relationship, just curricularly. You heard about it, social studies, and you know, our band program has gone over, had a joint rehearsal with the band program there. Their chorus and band will come over and perform this spring. We had the Chinese teacher present to all our 8th graders and promote her program as we're getting registrations. And then they just do it. They do a great 8th grade orientation if you've never been part of that. It really is exciting to go and see it. It's their students that really sell the school. They have just everything from their student council, the student leaders on each house going and taking, you know, there's 600 students around the building, and then the parents at the same time. And it's just well-run. You come away, my son came home just pumped. He said, I can't wait. Of course, now they're all ready to be done with SCS. It's like,
Right.
what do you mean I'm not there yet? That is to be expected when we talk about how normal that is. We don't want you to stay in the nest forever. We've got you ready to go here, and it's okay if you're a little tired of us. That's not a bad thing. Yep.
Because we're a little tired of you.
You guys are hitting all the good lines tonight. Keep it going. All right. Another thing with our music program, it's been years since we were involved with the District Music Festival, which is a gathering from all of Chittenden County schools. Students audition for it, and they come together under a guest conductor for choral rehearsals and instrumental music. And so we had 17 students who were selected to be part of that this year, which, again, they came back just fired up about, just sitting with their peers and seeing that music, I've got friends who are playing in other schools now. And you're going to be playing in high school, and some of it is I'm connecting with musicians from Williston, Heinsberg, who are going to be part of that band. Because that's one thing we've really tried to work to develop is continuing that pipeline so that just because you're a great musician in 8th grade doesn't mean it's time to hang up your instrument and celebrate that. There's a lot more to that beyond. So, Teen Ops is another cool program, a connection we built with CVU. We've got, I believe it's now up to 7 students, 7 CVU students that come to SCS 1 day a week. Susan Grasso coordinates that, and they provide tutoring for our kids. It's really an independent thing where parents pay for this tutoring. They pay $20 for an hour of tutoring. $10 of that goes to the student. $10 of that goes to promote the program and kind of develop it further. But I can tell you personally, because I've got a family member involved in it, and it's been great support. He really looks forward to it. He's got a friend at CVU now, as he's getting some support in math, and this is a boy he's going to run cross country with, and so he's really weirded out that this boy likes math. It's just I didn't know high schoolers like math. So we've got it happening, I think, in clarinet, French horn, some reading, and grades from 2 to 8th grade. So it's something we're kind of promoting and just saying, hey, this is an opportunity, and trying to find ways to leverage it for both sides.
Does it happen at the school? Or
It happens at the school. We're really hesitant to have it be a home visit. That's just, since we're promoting it, we want to make sure that it's safe for both the student and for our students. And so we do it at school with supervision. So either Susan's there or I'm there. Our goal is eventually to tie it into our homework club, and it would just be another resource tied into our homework club. So we'll kind of see how we can make that develop.
Does the local high school student get some kind of credit?
Not credit,
Or
they,
is there value about how?
they can
Oh, they get
include it as
paid?
their community service, but they get paid. They get paid $10 an hour, which for them, and it involves not just CVU students, there's some South Burlington students, I think some Essex students,
Wow.
and Susan Grasso, who's a Shelburne parent. It's just kind of her brainchild.
She's the executive director of it?
Yep.
Wow.
It's a neat little website, and what it does is also promotes volunteer opportunities for students.
Mhm.
So this tutoring is just one component of it. So it's kind of a social networking where the students can come together, talk about what they want to be involved in, and I volunteered at this. They had a great group at the Penguin Plunge that in some ways kind of came together around this.
That's a
So,
great idea.
You know, she has a succession plan. Her husband was just named.
I'm hearing that she's staying in town. Yeah,
Interesting.
you want to keep the home, but, so she sees this as her job. She really wants to keep it going, so. Some great stuff happening with Flynn, in part due to PTO and part due to a grant that Sally Stevens. So Flynn's been coming in and working with 6 classrooms on integration of the arts. So we're seeing some integration in world language vocabulary, in 3rd grade social studies, and English grammar at the middle school. Doing dancing around grammar.
And this is, you were talking about grants before. This was, they were going to ask for a little bit of money and then a little bit of money from PTO. And I want to say they were going to ask PTO for $1,800. And then this was going to be in place of John Gilmore coming.
Mm-hmm.
And Sally Stevens was filling out the grant. She goes, I'm just going to ask for it all. So she filled out the grant and got a very large grant.
Yeah.
And so we were able to also get John Gilmore because this grant was so large. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. And then we get teachers applying for grants from SHIPS. Gretchen Garvey, who's kind of leading with our wellness and the mindfulness. So that's highlighted there. If you're around on the 15th, 16th, you want to hit our musical. Kristen Bamberger, our new middle school music teacher, her debut performance as director, and has already, that's about 50% more students than we had involved in the actual performance last year, and it is 10 more boys than we had last year.
Wow.
So she's got boys involved, which is just really exciting. Not that I want to be sexist, but that was kind of one of the things. It seems like half our school is boys. Maybe we should have a percentage of our boys would want to be involved in music somehow, and she's got them. So, and then CY and Margot Austin. Sometimes there's a question, what does our SAP do? And what she does is, one of her roles is to coordinate Project LEAD, which is Leadership Education, the Anti-Drug is what that stands for. And it's a group that meets 1 day a week on Thursdays. Students give up their lunch to come and gather with her and develop ideas around leadership for wellness for the school, Red Ribbon Week. She has 60 kids coming, giving up lunch 1 day a week. And they've had this retreat. Now that what they built at the retreat, first of all, it was team building, then they're planning a dialogue night. And the topic they've decided would be really important to talk about is teenage anxiety. So they're going to take the YRBS data. We actually did the YRBS this morning. We'll look at that data, talk about what it says, and then involve parents in conversations about what could families do to kind of counteract anxiety. Margot also gave a parent talk the other morning. She wanted to try something a little different. So at 7:30 in the morning, she offered a coffee hour. And we had 24 parents show up for a conversation around teenage parenting.
Wow.
So, yeah, some cool stuff happening.
Parenting teenagers.
Yeah,
I guess that would be the topic, wouldn't it?
What was it?
Said you meant parenting teenagers.
Yeah, I wondered.
Word order makes a difference sometimes in this language. My Russian slips out some, but word order doesn't matter in Russian. So. Then other professional development we've got going. We just got great things going. I mean, I would highlight the algebra work. I know algebra has been a hot topic in the past, and this year for the first time, we just had the algebra midterm. The same midterm was given at CVU, at Williston, Heinsberg, Charlotte, and Shelburne. So the curriculum is coordinated, and the same final exam will be given. That we've gotten to the point of aligning and assuring that the skills that a student comes out of algebra with at CVU are the same skills you're coming out of at Shelburne, and continuing to refine that.
So is that Algebra 1 at CVU is essentially then what?
Is essentially what we're offering
are,
to our 8th graders,
okay.
that they have the opportunity to move into geometry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that's new. Sounds like that's new and interesting with them taking the same midterm final.
It is, yeah, to really get some alignment around
Yeah.
it and assure that, and this group is meeting. Molly McClaskey
Yeah.
has been a real mover in this and has the math coordinators coming together and just assuring that, if we're saying on paper it's the same thing, then it really should be. Let's demonstrate that knowledge.
What percent of the 8th graders took the midterm, do you know?
This year we've adopted a different model where 100% of our kids are involved in Algebra Seminar. We don't have an
Wow.
alternative program.
Okay.
And so there are some students, there's two options. You go to Algebra Seminar and then you either are in it as an enrichment class, in which case you're saying, I'm not interested, I'm not trying to pass the algebra final, I'm just here to prep myself a little bit better for algebra at CVU. And they take one midterm, which is just an 8th grade midterm. And then I believe it was about 80% of our students took the algebra midterm, which means I'm really trying to be successful in this algebra program. Because there's so much overlap. I think we've had John Madden sit and talk that, roughly 60% of the 8th grade curriculum is algebra anyways. And so we're not trying to, in our seminar we're adding on this little piece, and you're still getting a lot of the algebra in 8th grade anyways. And Common Core is pushing that more. More and more it's seeming we're going to get the majority of these algebra concepts. Some of them are starting in 6th grade. And so you're reaching a sequence where I think the majority of our students are going to be taking geometry as freshmen at CVU. That's really kind of the target. It'll never be 100%, but.
Yeah, Several years ago, we had several meetings about
I've heard
algebra
about them.
in the middle school. Yes, you missed that.
It attracted a fine crowd, like some of our other.
It did. It was comparable to fourth grade parent nights
Really?
this year.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think Alice brought that up last night when we were talking
That
about all
it's
the
nice
progress.
to be, yeah.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah.
So it works.
Yeah.
School safety training, obviously coming off of the unfortunate incident in Connecticut, there was a lot of conversation in December and continues around school safety. You probably noticed when you had to walk around to
Yeah.
come in this building, that's an outgrowth of that. That we're just locking various doors and asking the question of how accessible should our schools be, and what can we do to assure that students are safe? And so we've had a faculty forum right after Newton, we've had a faculty meeting around it. You know, we'll practice our intruder drill on Monday. And really what we've come to the assurance is we're probably one of the most secure schools in Vermont. I mean, the systems are in place and have been in place, but that doesn't mean that there's not things we need to do to tweak the system a little bit.
Is that intruder drill done with students in the school, or is that
Yes,
done?
it's done with students in the school. We'll do it a 2-time sequence. This time we'll announce it. And that's simply, you know, there's an intruder in the building. We test all our systems. Students and teachers are instructed to, you know, get out of harm's way and hidden as quickly as possible. It is if you had a violent individual in the building. And we've got security systems where at the push of a button from the front desk with Esther, we can instantaneously lock the building into 4 quadrants, you know, sealed magnetically, and you can't get to the other side of those pieces. We've obviously got some issues in the middle school wing. You know, if you've walked through that, you know, it's one thing to lock a door when you're in a Kiva. What do you do in that wing? So our goal has really been to isolate that wing. That's been a lot of the work. So, you know, if you're in that wing, you're not getting into any of the rest of the building, but still problematic.
Yep.
So that's been a pretty common parent concern. And we also heard about the breezeway. You always
Yeah,
hear about the breezeway in
absolutely.
terms of, you know, of safety. You know, because we got students passing across that, passing by our front walkway.
When Patty wrote this up last night, one thing I didn't get a chance to ask her is that, have you shared this policy with the police department so that if they need to
Yeah, police
come,
department
they know
is
what
actually,
to do?
yeah, they're actually part of our safety committee that meets once a month.
Okay.
We have Aaron Noble, we have a meeting coming up with the police chief and the fire chief. Because really, there's a couple things that we've recognized we're not prepared for. One is a relocation. You know, we have it on paper that we go to the field house. We haven't practiced that.
Yeah.
And so we'll be doing that this spring. You know, if we're out of this building, we have to go somewhere. What's going to be, you know, if we're doing something like that, what's the police response? How do we interact with them? Who's in charge at that point?
Yeah.
You know, you have that whole emergency command structure and who's talking to who and who's making decisions. And, you know, we'll literally, you know, work with situations where we'll have them block Harbor Road for us. Because honestly, in a difficult situation, probably the most problematic thing is what are we going to do with every parent who wants to come pick up Alan at school? And I'm going to come down there and pick up my child now. And, you know, to be prepared for that, that's a lot of the chaos. Whether you have a fire, whether you have an intruder drill, whatever it is how do you deal with that response?
I think our kids got sent home a few years ago because there was a bear in the neighborhood.
Really?
Yeah.
I remember hearing about that.
Yeah, I mean.
Those
That was an
kids who
intruder.
walked home? Did
Yeah,
they-
an intruder
Did they
alert.
have to?
Yeah. We've also done training around bullying harassment. Actually, CSSU had an entire training with Tracy Sagawa, who is the head of the Human Rights Commission. Does a great training around the legalities of bullying and harassment, and also what should the school response be? You know, what does the latest research show we should be doing in bullying cases and harassment cases, and there's laws that guard that. Been some tremendous growth. You're probably aware we stumbled on that a little bit last year. And I can, you know, look you in the eye and say we've learned and we're far ready prepared, and we shared that information with the entire faculty over 2 faculty meetings just last week. So I'm feeling like we're in good shape. An exciting piece that's developed is also something CSSU put together for us, which is there's 2 gentlemen, Tracy Thresher and Larry Bissonette, who, you may have heard of them. They put together a documentary, Wretches and Jabberers. They're two gentlemen with autism who have created a documentary, demonstrating that just some folks with visible disability, our natural stereotype is that's linked to a lack of intelligence.
Didn't you write that thing for the CSSU?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
It was a great.
Yeah.
And are they coming back?
They're coming back.
Yep.
We're going to have that documentary and a question and answer period with all our middle school students with them. And Charlotte did it last year. And so they've done some great legwork for us around, and the framing on that conversation is really bullying and harassment. For us, it was really disability awareness for faculty, but we're going to take a different approach to it. Because I think we know what the natural response of a middle school student would be to someone, with severe autism who is mumbling or looking totally incoherent. And so, to have that, it had a powerful emotional response on us, and same at Charlotte. And excited to make that happen in March, and it's actually going to be happening at CVU, at Williston, at Heinsberg in our school. So it's kind of a coordinated piece, I think. In fact, we're probably going to go to Williston to use their auditorium for it, just because the cafetorium just isn't quite going to work for that. I don't think we can build an auditorium in quite that amount of time.
Probably not.
And then social studies work and math best practice, and I feel like I've talked a lot, so I think that's kind of an update for you.
Very good.
And we are having a spelling bee. I conducted a spelling bee qualifying test this morning, and we'll do it next year, and thank you for putting that stipend back in the budget. But
What was the participation? Were there a lot of kids?
I had 85 third, fourth, and fifth graders today.
Wow.
And I think I've got roughly 50 6th, 7th, and 8th graders tomorrow that will filter down to 30 and have the actual bee next week. Yeah, so a lot of interest.
85, so that's like
Yeah.
basically over a third.
Yeah,
Wow.
they did not like the word pterodactyl.
Well,
It was not happy.
Neither was not happy with that.
I like the word pterodactyl. Spell check.
I like the word, but not spelling.
Not spelling it.
Next item is the second quarter financial management report, which is in our packets. As Bob likes to go directly to the bottom line, the good news there is right now we're projecting a surplus of $155,000 for the fiscal year. And certainly that can change. All it takes is something unforeseen to affect that, but right now it's certainly a good trend. And we had talked about that during the budget discussions. Knowing that we were on track with a number comparable to that allowed us to put an article on the ballot to do a transfer to expenditure from the fund balance that allowed us to avoid allow us to avoid the two vote scenario. So
Was that about the number that we were throwing around?
the number is it 165?
165 is the article.
Is the article, yeah.
No, but I mean in terms of fund,
What we thought?
the
this
results.
We had this number at the time we were
Okay,
having
all
the
right. So
conversation.
we're right on the number.
Yeah. I think three of us were at the CSSU meeting, and I think Dave and Tim, you were both there for the common topic. I guess I'd say if you want to know what went on, take a look at the Colt report, especially for the legislative update. Elaine had some good information in there on what the legislature is looking at. The food service, you're on that committee, and we got a report on the food service. I thought, one of the most interesting things, Tim, I thought of the gentleman who came and spoke from the Middlebury thing was the description that he gave how, you can have the teacher, essentially if the whole class is essentially doing a class, it kind of like frees up the teacher to do differentiated instruction, throughout the whole classroom, which I thought was a very interesting aspect of that. So that takes us to 6.0 discussion matters, no policies to review. As far as preparation for town meeting, I think that the PowerPoint for that is essentially done. I think we may want to look at tweaking that a little bit,
Yep, we'll
but,
pop in the new kneecap data, which we
yeah,
have, which I forgot to mention in my principal's report. I can come back to it if you want it. It was on
I
the
think we can take a look at it. And are you going to do a
It's
formal
We'll
presentation
do a
of it at
formal
some point?
presentation in March. I just wanted to have the initial summary data.
So I think we can
When does
discuss
kneecap
it.
information go home, Alan?
I think Patty's stuffing the envelopes tomorrow. Teachers got their summary data yesterday.
Any board corners that anyone thinks we ought to do between now and, we're going to have this in for the budget.
Right,
I assume we're on track.
Yeah, I delivered all those today.
Perfect.
Printed 5,000. And I said, we should probably make them any color but green, and they're green.
Why any color but green?
I don't know, I just had this thing about them being green.
Is that money thing?
Color of
thing.
money?
But,
You don't want to make it
no,
red.
it's fine, it was kind of funny.
Yeah. Green means go, like
Yeah, it
gas.
does. Yeah, it does. And I think I'm proud of my military-style three-word phrase for on the top there: excellence, efficiency, and responsibility.
Nicely
Yeah.
done. Good work, Dave.
I was just gonna write a quick letter to the editor encouraging everyone to vote for the budget, if you guys are okay with that.
Yep.
This
Great.
will go into the paper on the 21st. Yep. So
Okay.
it'll go in on the 21st, and I was considering maybe writing a letter for the 28th, so that there's.
It's the 21st, when is the vacation?
The vacation
That's the
is
week
during
of
the
the 20
28th, so.
Yeah, the 25th.
to the
Yes,
28th.
that's
That
right,
Monday.
good. So it'll be in the paper before everybody's on vacation.
Yeah, it'll be in the paper
Perfect.
this week,
Okay,
this
great.
next week from tomorrow.
Okay. And then we had on here 6.4 facilities.
And that was per my request.
Yep, to talk about, kind of, what do we do to get ourselves going to be looking at, I forget when the bond falls off.
It falls off in 2015, so we would be able to start construction in the summer of 2015.
Okay.
When I talked with Bob, that would
Okay.
be kind of the timing so that we wouldn't have a significant drop off and then suddenly have this spike. It's about $120,000 per year in debt payment.
Does everybody get that piece of it or understand what the kind of chronology is with that or the concern?
If you could go over it again, that would be great.
We have debt service that is part of the budget every year right now, and I don't know exactly what it was incurred for. It might have been.
It was B-wing work is my
Yeah,
understanding.
yeah. So in any event, that debt service, that debt will be retired, I guess, as of the 2014 budget, or it'll
Yeah.
carry through that budget year. We've talked about the roof and other work that needs to be done around the building. The roof is, essentially at its life expectancy, and we don't want to end up, living dangerously and end up having a problem that leads to mold and all manner of other ugly things. So from a timing standpoint and a budget standpoint, we would want to have an article voted on by the public to pay for a new roof, possibly windows, whatever other, things that we decide we would want to include, but so that, the new debt service starts right when the old debt service ends, because if we have a situation where 120 odd grand a year falls off one year, and then we, then we start it up, and after having taken a break of a year or two, it's just going to be more difficult to manage, I think, from a, I hesitate to say public relations standpoint, but just in how it's going to fluctuate and what that would mean for an increase of the year it went back on. So we just want to make sure that we're prepared with all of the work that would need to be done ahead of time so that we would be able to warn an article in time. So,
I think it would be great if the number has been 125, if we could see that reduced somewhat. I mean, I want to make sure that our capital spending isn't driven by the, the retiring debt service.
Right.
And just matched. I mean, I'd like to know what the capital program is going to be. And, really do the cost-benefit analysis
Right.
rigorously before we agree to, another 125,000.
I agree. I don't think you need to necessarily fill that bucket and
Right.
say, okay,
Exactly.
what can we do? Can we spend the whole 125? I'm sure we could. It is to determine, besides the roof, what are the other projects that are prudent to do?
Exactly.
And we have had a lot of conversation about a lot of single pane windows, 30, 40-year-old windows throughout the building, asbestos. I think that's all those panels outside the middle school.
Right.
The 6 to 8 wing. So, there's things that should be addressed. And I think that, the process is that, we designate a group or a committee or, whatever we want to describe it as, that will identify those things, get some estimates, and then see what the debt service looks like. What are the terms? Hopefully interest rates are still low at the time. So, what would the terms look like of any bond issue that we could do, and figure out what's affordable. But I think we start with what are the things that really should be addressed.
Right.
So,
But I mean, what's the process to put that laundry list together, I guess, in terms of, I mean, who are the stakeholders and how do you say that windows are a priority over, quarters and some of those open wings or something like that?
And I can tell you what I'd like, our contribution as an administration to the conversation is really, we see some facility improvements that will directly drive the improvement of education. That there are some things within wings of the school where I think, every day because of the facility, we have great teachers who are not being as effective as they could be. And those are conversations we'd like to have on the table, because I think at the end of the day, if we've got energy, if we're even more of a Green Star building with a beautiful new roof, but haven't touched education, I think we've missed the boat there.
so closing up those rooms in the middle school.
Looking at some things like that, which I think are big conversations to have and are going to take time.
But I mean, I would think that, 2015 is not far away.
No,
It's not.
we need to be looking at it
You
now.
have to get on it quick.
I think Dave has been looking at it all.
He has,
I mean,
yep.
he's got a 5-year.
We've got some numbers on specific facility pieces.
Yep.
What we don't have numbers on are ideas such as when we were sitting in our board meeting, and I made the point, notice the students walking by and how it's completely disruptive, and that's happening in 18 classrooms a day on a regular basis. We don't have numbers around something like that. But we do have access to a school down the road in Heinsberg that had the exact same configuration and has turned it into contained classrooms. So that's a project they've just completed that we could take a look at.
Do you have a recommendation on how we look at the various projects, price them and prioritize them? Because eventually what obviously has to happen is, proposal has to be, it becomes an action matter that we have to vote on at some point. So, how do you envision getting to that point?
Yeah, and I talked with Bob Mason about it today, and what Bob recommended was that we put together a committee, and that committee would have a couple board members. Don't want 3, so we reach a quorum, so we can have meetings, but a couple board members, administration, teacher or 2, perhaps a community member, Dave and Bob, and start the discussion and allow that to move us forward. That was his recommendation coming out of today, and we can get you, I've got rough figures of things right now, but I think it's kind of laying out a timeline and a sequence.
Yeah, as I was going to say, I think you guys need to develop a timeline. I'm not sure if we've got to, have an action matter for this to, charge a committee. I guess we do. So I think that's what we should probably plan then for our next meeting would be, to get a recommendation on, on a committee, on a timeline.
Okay.
So that we can then charge that committee to do whatever work to get us where
where we need to be from a public article and all that good stuff.
Okay.
So are you hoping that in March you will charge a committee to develop recommendations? Or are you hoping that in March you will have
You'll
a
have
recommendation for what a
some-
committee might look like?
Say that again.
I
I'm
was
not sure I
starting to write
understood
down that
the
in
differences.
March you would take action and charge a committee to do this work. Go, start studying.
Yes.
Probably meet with architects. I'm thinking, given the situation that I'm thinking about, the wing that you're talking about is a little more complicated in Shelburne than it was in
Right.
Heinsberg, because there are going to be some rules around egress that you're gonna bump up against. And an architect's gonna have to work with you on that. How do you make sure that there's a safety issue that's being addressed?
So, yeah, I guess, the action item would be to charge the committee to look at all of the issues.
Yeah,
And
okay.
And I would think if you're thoughtful about your committee, that there's probably some good resources in the community with strong commercial construction or architectural backgrounds.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
can move us down the road
Yeah.
in the right direction.
Yeah. So think about who wants to volunteer to be on the committee from the board.
Who's my neighbor that works for Truex?
Dave
Epstein.
Epstein.
Yeah.
And Dave Epstein and I
I'd
have
be
done,
interested.
we've walked through our building, he's walked me through Heinsberg. Obviously, I'm not sure that he would be a committee member because he's got a commercial interest in being involved, but he's more than willing to offer us consulting from the beginning, and he's been great. He's been having this conversation with me for a year and a half now.
Good.
So
I'd be interested.
I'd be interested in doing
Okay.
it.
Oh. So, so we'll plan for that then, to add that to our agenda for next time. Next item is action matters to schedule a retreat date. By the way, this was already approved as the date at the CSSU meeting, so hopefully it works
Bit of a
for
moot point.
all of us. But,
It's for information purposes.
Yeah, could we get a motion to approve Friday, May 31st as our retreat
So moved.
date? Do you have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So I believe we're going to be CSSU in the afternoon and locals in the morning. Was that
Locals in the morning.
And everybody for lunch.
That worked much better last year.
Yeah. So, next item is the consent agenda, which was to approve various minutes from meetings, approve the director's orders, and a couple of policies to adopt petty cash and travel and related expenses. So can I have a motion there?
So moved.
Second.
Whoops.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. And then, excuse me, just our next meetings. Next meeting for this board is March 13th. Please note that that is at 5 o'clock. It's the reverse of our usual timing. Reason for that is we will reorganize the board again, and so you have to have CSSU reps appointed from the board so that then they can go to the next CSSU meeting.
And it says 5 o'clock, but stay tuned because I think that it's likelier to be later than that,
So maybe-
given the agenda. That's what we'll do. We'll look at the agenda. We won't have you be here and.
So
people-
maybe 5:30 or 6 o'clock, depending
Right.
on what we think the
Right,
agenda might be.
depending on the agenda.
Yeah. Since we won't have a common
I was
topic
just
after.
gonna say
Right.
no comment topic.
Will there
yeah.
be a common topic for the CSSU meeting?
No.
Okay. Okay. And with that, if somebody could make a motion to go into executive session for the purposes of personnel discussions.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and we will, after the executive session, we'll come out of executive session and adjourn from there.
So you can leave stuff here.